So today's video was prompted by an email. A photographer named Ruben messaged me regarding getting into large format photography. So I decided to make this video to cover some of the basic aspects of large format photography and what you're going to want to look for, or at least give you some familiarity with shooting large format if you're trying to get into that. Four things I want to cover: the cameras themselves, lenses, the film holders, and the film. Those are the four basic things you'll need to pick up when starting to shoot large format photography. You'll also probably need a tripod, a light meter, or a camera that works as a light meter, but you probably already have those. They aren't specific to shooting just large format. So first off, let's talk about the cameras. With large format cameras, there's actually two sizes you encounter. There's 4x5 and 8x10. 4x5 shooting film that's 4 inches by 5 inches, and 8x10 shooting film that's 8 inches by 10 inches. For example, I have some of the negatives with me here. This is a sheet of, we've got four 4x5 negatives, and they're black and white negatives. And then this is an 8-inch by 10-inch negative, a color negative. You can see the size difference is 4 times bigger, twice as big in each dimension. The cameras today, the camera and examples today I'll be looking at is mostly 4x5. For the most part, it's going to be more portable, more common, more practical, a lot cheaper. Though 8x10 is great too, and I mean, it's just huge, but for practical purposes, getting into 4x5 is probably a better idea. So this is my 4x5 camera. This is what's known as a field camera. It doesn't look much like a camera, but that's because it's folded up. Which brings me into my next point. There's a few different designs of large format cameras. There's monorail cameras, which kind of have the front and back standards. I'll show you the standards in a moment. Attached to a monorail, and then that's attached to a tripod. It's more of a studio camera. It's probably not as portable. And then there's also press cameras, which you've probably seen in old movies. They usually had like a big flash on the top, but they're more for run and gun shooting. They have like a rangefinder on the top. But this is my choice for large format. It's called a field camera, and the purpose of it is to like fold up and be more portable, so you can take it out into the field. It's great for landscapes, but it's also good for studio as well. So let me open this up and show you kind of what it looks like. So looks kind of like an accordion when you open it up. This is the rear standard here. It's what holds the film and holds the focusing screen. And then the front standard, just need to pop it up here. And this would be the front standard here, this piece, and that's what holds the lens. Right now it doesn't have a lens on it, but you can kind of get a look at the camera. Focusing itself on a field camera is controlled by some of the knobs on the front here. You can see it literally just brings the lens closer and further from the focusing screen, and that's how you get your focus. Now I've shot this in some of my other videos and explained a little bit about it, but you can have a look and see examples in some of the other videos. But basically you're focusing from the lens back to this glass on the back, and then you're replacing the glass with a sheet of film, so that what was focused on the glass is now focused on the film, and you get your shot. Again, these old cameras, they don't have any meters. I wouldn't expect any large format camera, except for maybe a press camera, to have a built-in meter, but you can use a light meter, you can use a metering app on your phone, or you can use another camera. Just make sure it's set to the same ISO as the film you're shooting, and just use the same settings on the large format lens as your camera's telling you to use on your digital camera. So the biggest advantage of shooting large format film is probably the extra detail you're going to get. The film is so large that what you can extract from it is incredibly detailed, and it is a huge advantage. But in addition to that, one nice thing about large format cameras is what's called the movements. And if you're not familiar with movements, it basically The large format cameras allow you to change the relationship between the lens and the film, and it could be a whole video in and of itself. But I won't go into too much detail. But let me show you an example. So one of the movements, usually the lens is parallel to the film plane, but you can also, let's see here, you can also twist that either way. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about what these do, but just know that it gives you a ton of options for shooting. You can correct perspective, or you can distort perspective in unique ways. You can get more focus or less focus depending on what you want. Good for like architecture photography, where you can straighten out lines rather than having them converge or diverge. Yeah, it's kind of a complicated subject, but just know that you have a lot more options for shooting. Now, one of the things you want to look at when you're choosing a large format camera is the back. So the back here, this is a simple, I believe it's called a bail back. Basically, you focus onto the glass screen here. It's just ground glass, and then you're going to replace the ground glass with a film holder. This back's nice because you just open it up, pop the film holder in, and close it back up. There's no parts that detach, so this always stays on here. You don't have to worry about losing it. Most backs themselves, actually, this is in a portrait orientation, but can be adjusted. Let's see if I can do this into a landscape orientation, just by physically detaching the whole back itself. Some kind of rotate, there's like a lock and you can rotate it. But yeah, this would be a ground glass focusing back. You would use something like a loop to focus on it to make sure everything's that you want in focus is in focus. But there are a few other cameras out there. Some use a rangefinder system for focus, and some even don't have a focusing back. They use kind of like an eyepiece on the top. But for traditional large format photography, a ground glass back is probably the way to go. Another thing you might want to look at when getting a large format camera is the amount of extension it has. Depending on the lens you're using, some require more and some require less extension to achieve different levels of focus. Naturally, you're going to want infinity focus, but if you want to do a lot of macro photography, focus on things that are really close up, the more extension you have, the closer you can focus. So I'm not sure what this guy is, but it's never given me too much of a problem. And you can see these things extend out a fair bit. You just want to make sure you're not overextending it, because you could rip the bellows here. But this would be for focusing on something quite close up. So next up, we'll talk about the lenses. Lenses on large format are pretty unique, especially compared to medium format or 35mm cameras. So the lenses themselves large format lenses are pretty unique compared to 35mm or even medium format lenses. They look something like this. Now, the lens itself doesn't come with like a lens mounting standard like the Nikon F mount. It actually mounts to a lens board, just a piece of wood. You can make it yourself, or you can order it online. There's a company on eBay that makes lens mounts, or rather lens boards. And then the board itself just attaches to the front of your camera. Large format cameras have different sizes for lens boards, so you want to have a look at that, but there's a few pretty universal standards. I think this one's 4" by 4" is the lens board size. So with the large format lenses, all the mechanics of the camera are more or less built into the lens. You've got your aperture and your shutter speed, and then the camera is kind of just this box to make sure that the lens is focused properly onto the sheet of film. So most large format lenses are the same. They've got a little tab or ring for adjusting aperture, a ring or a tab for adjusting shutter speed. They've got an opening and closing tab, And then they've got a method of cocking the shutter and a method of releasing the shutter. And often there's a threaded cable release slot. This one here is right next to the release lever here. You can see all it would take is to put a cable release in there to release that. But yeah, you cock it and you shoot it. And strictly mechanical, again, aperture, shutter speed, and just opening and closing. The reason you would leave the lens completely open is to focus on the back of the camera, make sure everything's in focus, and then before you put the film in the camera, you're going to close that up and get the lens ready, cock it, set your appropriate aperture and shutter speed, and once the film is in the camera and ready to go, you would just release the lens. So keep in mind with large format, focal lengths are different than you're used to, and shutter speeds are usually not as high as you can get with a modern camera. This lens itself, it's a Nikkor 180mm. Now, there's a general rule of thumb that says divide by 3, and that gives you an equivalent on like a 35mm camera. So I'd say that's pretty close to accurate. This is a 180mm lens, which gives you, about the same viewing as if you had a 60mm on a 35mm camera. So pretty good for portraits, also decent for landscapes. It's not too long and it's not very wide, so it's a pretty practical lens. And then with shutter speeds, this one has a bulb, it has 1 second, and then it goes all the way up to 1/400th of a second. So 1/400th of a second is, especially with slower films, is okay for using in daylight. It's not going to cause too much trouble. But depending on what you intend on shooting, keep in mind that shutter speeds generally don't go much over 500th of a second on large format cameras. Just for example, so yeah, this was a Nikon 180mm lens. We'll look at the other large format lens I have for 4x5. This is a Fuji lens, a Fujinon. And what do we got here? It's a 105mm. Also keep in mind that your max apertures, just because they need to cover such a large sheet of film, are generally going to be much more restrictive. So these are both f5.6 lenses, which is usually pretty close to the widest aperture you're going to get. But because of the optics of large format, f5.6 is going to be incredibly shallow depth of field. Don't be too worried thinking like, oh, where's a large format 1.8 or 2.8? An f5.6 on large format is very shallow depth of field. So this one here, Fuji 105. So again, divide by 3, 105. It's going to be pretty close to 35mm or so. So not too wide, but again, much more practical in a lot of scenarios, especially maybe indoor if you're trying to capture an entire room or something like that. This one does go up to a 500th of a second. You can probably see the actual shutter itself, which is kind of this middle point of the lens that's mounted onto the board, is a little bit different. You might find the same lens with a different shutter, and the shutter itself is actually usually dictates the size of the opening required on the lens board. So usually it's the Copal standard. There's like Copal 0, Copal 1, Copal 2, Copal 3, and I think there's like 00 as well. And that just lets you know the size of the shutter and the size of the lens that's required to fit onto the board. So yeah, same mechanics, open and close. You can change the aperture, change the shutter, and the cocking lever is down on the bottom here, or top, depending on which way you mount it. And then the release and the cable release hole right here. So there it is. Another thing to mention about the lenses is the coverage. Because these lenses project onto the film, and you could be moving the lens around with those movements I talked about earlier, something that's often mentioned is the coverage of a lens. You want to make sure it has at least enough coverage to cover the film when it's right centered in the middle of the camera. But a lot of people like to see if there's extra coverage so they have more room for movements that kind of can change these perspectives or give you more options with shooting. So just to make it clear, I'll show you mounting a lens and lens board onto a large format camera. With the Zone 6, which is this large format camera, there's just two tabs here at the top and the bottom that you slide out of the way. Some have kind of corner tabs, but it's pretty simple. You just throw the lens on. And again, because it's square, you could mount it in any orientation that suited you. Some people like to have the controls at the top, some like to have them on the bottom or the side. But once you put it on, you just secure it in place with these two tabs. And then you would open your lens and get it set up, good to go. So let's say you're all set up, you've got your large format camera, you got your lens mounted on the front, and you're ready to shoot. The next thing we need to talk about is the film holder. And that's what's going to pop into the back here and hold the film in place. It's going to keep the film safe from light until you're ready to make your exposure. And then it's going to keep the film, again, safe from any light that's going to ruin that exposure. So I'll just talk about that for a moment. So film holders look like this. I've got 3 of them here. And what these are is, they're called film holders. They're often called double dark slides because they hold 2 sheets of film. And the dark slide itself is this portion here. This is what keeps your film safe. Your film is actually going to be inside the holder. It's loaded this way, just like you open this tab, load it in complete darkness. And then before you can expose it to light, you're going to be sliding this dark slide over top. And you can do that on the other side as well, so that you have 2 sheets of film ready for shooting. And yeah, I don't know if there's single dark slides, but these film holders that hold 2 are the most common ones, and they're definitely more convenient than if they just held 1. So I can't show you an example of loading just because it needs to be done in complete darkness, but I can share with you some of the kind of conventions that you're going to want to employ when you shoot these. First off, if you've got a few of them, you want to keep them separate. You could put stickers on them or something. A lot of them have these like labeling areas here. And what I do is I name them. I have, for example, I just use the phonetic alphabet. I've got a Bravo, a Charlie, and a Delta. There's Alpha somewhere too. And then each side I've got a 1 or a 2 on. So Delta 1 and Delta 2 over here. And same with these guys here. Another thing you'll notice is that these holders have the little rivets on the top, and they also have a color. The standard convention, I believe, and this is what I use so that I'm always clear on what's in each, is that white means there's fresh film that's good to go, so that's ready to be shot. Black means there's either nothing in it or it's been shot. So if it's black, don't shoot it, and if it's got the white, then it means there's film in there good to go. You're still going to want to remember what type of film you have, especially if you're shooting like high speed or low speed, black and white and color. You could be shooting slide. So I have a master list somewhere that, I mean, you can keep it on your phone or somewhere with the film that's going to be convenient, but a master list saying Delta 1 has Kodak Tri-X in it, Delta 2 has Fuji Velvia in it, you know, and Bravo 2 has Ilford HP5 Plus in it. So you can remember which film is in each. Because you can imagine with a few of these, it can get pretty tricky. Have I shot it? Have I not? What film's in there? And then, I mean, there's common mistakes where some people will shoot the same side twice and get an inadvertent double exposure. So you're going to want to, yeah, keep track of what's in each, come up with a good labeling system, and also come up with a system like with the black and white tabs or these little rivets on the top that you can use to decide on what you're going to shoot or what's been shot or what's in each. The holders themselves, these ones they're all Fidelity Elite. You can get, I'm trying to think if it's Lisco Real or something. There's a few major companies that make them. These guys are actually pretty expensive for being so simple, but again, It's just the cost of shooting large format film, and they're there to protect your film. You can take this out into broad daylight, and no light's going to get in there and ruin your film. The film itself is going to come in boxes like this. Often it's a little bit smaller, but this is I think this is a 50 pack. Yeah, this is a 50 pack of codec tracks, which is 320 speed instead of 400. I'm not sure why. Tracks is usually 400, but for large format, you get 80 less speed. Anyways, I digress. You're gonna get a box of film like this, and it's kind of confusing, and I can't quite show you, but there's like a second box inside the box, and then inside usually a black bag, there's gonna be the sheets of film themselves. Sometimes they have a protective foil cover you're gonna have to open, but again, even just opening this box, you want to be in complete darkness, and you want to be really careful when you're loading it, kind of know what you're doing, because I mean, these things are pretty expensive, and you got 50 sheets of film in there that you don't want to ruin. Some of them come in 10 packs or 25 packs, but that being said, one of the cool things about large format film actually, which can help you out, is all these sheets of film actually have like what's called a notch code, and hopefully you can see on here, Tri-X 320 has this notch code. It's like 3 triangles and then a kind of rounded off rectangle. It sounds a little bit absurd, but when you get a film holder and you're not sure which film is in there, it means you can take it out into pure darkness and open it up and feel along the edge for that unique identification. It's almost, I guess, like Braille in a way. So in complete darkness, you'd be able to figure out what it is. Because once the film's been taken out of the box, there's really no way to remember what type it is. So you just run your finger along the edge and you feel for those notches. So if it's 3 kind of triangles, 3 sharp edges, and then a rounded rectangle, you know that's Tri-X 320. I'm not sure, Ilford has different conventions too for notches, but they're all unique enough that you can usually find out what you did load in there if you forgot to write it down. So I've actually tracked down an old 8x10 box I had, so I can show you what's inside, so you'll know kind of what to expect when you're loading your first film into a film magazine. Now this is an 8x10 box of 8x10 film, so it's literally just the same as 4x5 except bigger, so same things apply. It's also got a notch code. You can kind of see it on here. It's like a rounded circle, a rounded rectangle, and a rounded circle, and different sizing to kind of help you figure out that specifically that's it. But again, opening the box of the film needs to be done in complete darkness, but this one's empty, so I'll show you what's inside. So you're going to open it up, and again, you've got kind of this closed box. You're going to open that up, and you've got this bag, which is going to keep the film inside. And inside the bag, usually there's some cardboard to kind of keep the film from getting messed up. So you'd have, I think this was a 25 pack, so you'd have 25 sheets of film inside. And before you turn the lights on in your dark room or dark closet or whatever, what have you, you're gonna slide that back in. Make sure it's nice and folded over. You're gonna take that and put it in the first box. And that's going to go face down into the second box, and then the third box is going to close. And I like to put a bit of tape on the edges just in case, you know, this fell off the shelf. You don't want it to fall open and destroy all your film. So again, 8x10, but 4x5 is the same. It's just a smaller box. So tying it all together, there's the large format camera. You would focus the lens onto the screen. You would set all the settings so you're ready to shoot. Again, double check. You always want to make sure that's nice and closed and ready to go. Then you're gonna open your back, drop in the film magazine, make sure it's secure in there. You want to make sure that like absolutely no light's going to get in there. And once you've again verified that lens on the front is closed, so it's completely dark inside the camera, you're going to lift up the inner dark slide so that nothing is between the front of the lens and the back with the film in it. And you would, use your cable release or physically action the shutter and make that exposure. And then again, I use the black means it's been shot or it's empty convention to slide that in. Make sure it's nice and secure, that no light's going to get in, and then you could remove your film. So after you've shot your film, the next challenge is actually getting it developed. And there's a lot of labs out there that won't develop sheet film, so it might be good to look into before investing into a large format system. I personally develop a lot of my film at home, and with large format it requires a bit of extra kit. There's an adapter that's really popular right now for the Patterson Super System. It's called the Mod 54. It will let you do 6 sheets of 4x5 at a time, but it requires the larger Super System tank, and it's a fair bit of chemical to develop 6 of them at a time, just because of the orientation of it. I personally use a Patterson Orbital, which is kind of this old school, rare to find developing system. Here, I'll show it to you. It looks like this, and it's actually awesome. If you can track down one of these, really sweet. Barely uses any chemical. You actually develop the sheets kind of lying down. I'll open it up here. Believe it or not, this is all light safe. Once the lid's on, it's all secure. No light's going to get in there. But you open it up, and it looks like this. You can do 4 sheets at a time, 1 in each corner. And it's also great because you can take these pegs out, and you can actually do an 8x10 sheet of film, which is really convenient because I'm also shooting 8x10. One of the things though is I had to make a few modifications. If you end up finding one of these and want to use it, give me a shout. I'll show you what I did to it, but some simple modifications, and this guy works really well. So yeah, you can use the Super System with the Mod 54. You can use a Patterson Orbital, or you can probably just get it developed at the lab if you have one that can do sheet film. So finally, at the end of your workflow, you've got your film developed. You're either going to be scanning it or printing it in a traditional darkroom. Large format enlargers in the traditional darkroom are pretty rare, pretty expensive. I do a lot of contact printing with 4x5 and 8x10, which is pretty fun because all you need is just like a sheet of non-reflective glass to throw on top, sandwich the paper underneath, and you can print out a 1-to-1 copy of the negative. And because the negative is so large, you actually get some reasonably sized pictures. Other than that, I scan all my negatives as well, and scanners that can do sheet film are on the pricier side. Right now I have an Epson V800, but before that I had a V600, which wouldn't do sheet film. So the lower price point scanners generally don't do sheet film, and getting sheet film scanned at the lab can really add up. So again, you're gonna have to look into what you're gonna do when you have your film developed. What's your end game strategy? Some people do DSLR scanning, but I feel like if you're shooting such a detailed sheet of film, it might be worthwhile to get a proper scan out of it. A few accessories I didn't mention. Well, I did mention the loop. The loop, you're going to want to focus on that ground glass if you have a ground glass back. And then when you're out in the daylight, you might want what's called a dark cloth. You've seen them probably in old movies with the photographer throws it over his head. It's really to prevent the reflections on the glass and allow you to focus properly on that screen. One side is totally dark to keep it dark and keep the reflections out. The other side is generally white to reflect the light so it doesn't get too hot out there. The white on the outside, the black on the inside, and then there's usually some string to help attach it to the camera and a couple weights in it so that it doesn't blow away and stays over top of you when you're shooting with it. Also, one of the things I like to use, this is a Polaroid back for 4x5. It's been featured in a few of my other videos. This guy here, it's like your traditional film back, but it shoots Polaroids. It shoots, or rather Fujiroids, Fuji FP100C. So it's an instant film. I don't think there's any in there now. But yeah, you would put a cartridge of pack film in there. And rather than shooting sheet film, you'd be shooting instant film that you can pop out, wait a bit, peel it apart, and instant photography. If you haven't seen this before, check out the other videos on my channel. There's one or two on there with it. So that concludes a quick run through of large format. Again, this is mostly talking about 4x5, but 8x10 is the same. It's just larger. Same thing. It's got movements. It's got the lenses. Same operation. It's got backs. Again, getting into large format, I recommend a field camera. It's more portable. It's more versatile. But again, there's other nice options out there if you can find a monorail system or a nice press camera. It really depends on what you want, but either way, if you're shooting that 4x5 sheet film or even 8x10, the increase in quality is going to be incredible over 35 or medium format film. If you got any questions, feel free to give me a shout in the comments, or if you want to see any other video content, give me a shout. And thanks for watching.